Okay, welcome everyone to the Union County Board of Education budget work session. I'd like to call this meeting to order and begin with approval of the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and I see Miss McLam ready to go. So we'll start with the budget. I'll turn it over to you and board members. Please be ready with your questions, but we'll let Ms. McLam get started.
Okay, so you'll see some of the same slides that we had in our presentation last week at the board meeting from the superintendent's budget proposal. I'm just going to go through a lot of these in more detail and allow you to have some questions so we can, have some discussion about any of them you have questions about. So this is the proposed operating budget. You'll see the supplement increase at the top that we've taken into account and our mandated increases. Then when we come down to the program continuation, we've got our facilities and technology inflationary increases that we've included as some of the additional needs. And the insurance liability, some of the insurance market is fluctuating, so we've included in some of our mandatory $30,000 just to account for some of those fluctuations. And then 30 teaching positions to support class sizes in grades 4-12 with $2.1 million. We do have some Board of Education security increases to fund some of the additional needs that we've had at our board meetings and any of our other committee meetings at $40,000. And then board compensation, there's a lot of districts right now in conversations. We've had some back and forth. A few of them have asked. A lot of districts, especially districts in the larger counties, are evaluating board compensation. So we have listed this as a line item. So that's our sustaining operations section. If we want to talk about that section, if you have any questions about any of those items before we move on to the next section. Okay.
So just to talk about,
Hmm?
we've had the teaching positions to support class sizes in grades 4-12 in the budget a couple years going, right? But it has not made it to the final budget.
Correct. It has been part of the budget request, and we have been talking about the state legislated class sizes in K-3 that have impacted our 4-12 class sizes.
So 30 teaching positions in 53 schools, how would we do that? How would we determine which schools should get? Would it be one at each elementary? I don't know.
So right now we have a pretty expansive spreadsheet that we do every year based on increases or fluctuation in enrollment. Really our middle and high schools and maybe a few of our elementary schools, but really more middle and high school is where you see some of the larger class sizes. So that would be a conversation that Dr. Harris would have. We would have together with the principals to discuss schedules and where they may have some need in some of their core classes.
And you could have need and no classrooms, right?
That's a potential as well. There could be instances where class size, the biggest thing about the class size and the waivers that we do in K-3, we may have some need in some of our elementary schools to address where we've applied for a waiver in a specific grade level at a specific school in the prior year. We cannot apply for that same waiver the next year. So there may need to be some shifts in some of the elementary schools to allow for additional positions if we can't apply for a waiver.
And so instead of this being 4-12, it might actually be 1-12?
I think that's going to be a rare circumstance. It's going to be more in our 4-12 that we're going to need to make those adjustments.
Is there a certain ratio we're looking at here, like student to teacher?
So what we run our allocations on are at 1-25 as an average. But as we all know, that average doesn't always work out that way. It's a little easier in the elementary schools because they're not in multiple classes. But in the middle and high schools, it's a little more difficult.
So 1-25 across the district, middle and high?
We try to work on a 1-25 ratio. just it's just an average. It's not like everyone's going to be, but when we work the allotments we get with the class size requirements that we have to do, that's about what it works out to on average.
What's some of the triggers that might trigger this?
The need for an additional position. I think it's going to depend probably on the core, what classes you have that are the largest. You may have some scheduling that academics can work through with school performance, just to make sure whatever schedules you have in your master schedule maybe could be adjusted. But I would say it would be in your core required courses that you would want to focus any additional positions for class sizes. Okay. Investing in employees. So we have state mandated salary and benefit increases for hospital insurance and retirement. Plus, we've included the additional 2.5% that is currently listed in the state budget for this coming year's biennium budget. Those are all listed in the mandated request. District compensation study. So if you all will recall, the facilities and teacher assistant groups were the first two that we addressed when we did our market analysis. And there are some specific additional categories that we need to address, as well as just making sure with all the work that we've done, plus what the state mandated 15, like we're at 13 this year, 15 next year, the state minimum hourly rates that we're able to address those. Those are in the additional needs. We've got supplement increases for assistant principals. As I mentioned at the board meeting, it's been since 2014 since we've addressed any local supplement increase for our APs.
So we have determined that the $15 per hour is in this fiscal year from the state.
FY23, yes.
Yes,
As it stands right now. I mean, again,
I understand.
yeah.
I'm just asking as
I'm
of right
hoping.
now for next school year,
Yes.
what the
It's
requirement is.
It's 2.5% or $15 an hour, whichever's greater.
And we think that the 2.5% will cover across the board. These numbers will cover the $15 for the ones that have to be 15.
On the projected in the salary benefits section in section A,
Yes,
yes.
thank you.
You're welcome.
So, okay, go ahead.
Staff recruiting and retention, we've looked at a state salary schedule, and the steps 15 to 25 plus are all pretty well the same. I think the 25 does bump up slightly, and those are your most experienced teachers. We need to, do some retention efforts around that group, and increasing another 2.5% on that scale for them as a local supplement is how we've addressed it in the budget request. Then national board teacher credentialing, we've got a total of 10 new staff that could apply for and go for their national board, and then 60 renewals each year. So this is just a way, that's how we've built it in. Depending on how much interest we have, we can make adjustments if we don't have as many renewals, that we could increase. It's a way for us to increase an individual's salary without having to include it in the local budget. Because if you pay the $1,500 for them to get their credentialing, their state salary increases by 12%.
That 60, is that school system wide?
Right. We would have an application process for the individuals on an annual basis that we would do for new credentialing, and then the renewals come up every 5 years.
Right,
And so
but
we look to see how many we have and what renewal cycle they were on, and felt like at least 60 a year would cut. The 60,000 would cover at least 60 individual renewals and 10 new applicants.
How many school system wide? About how many do we have?
Well,
I don't remember. How many?
I think the intent is that this item would cover, or at least attempt to cover any teacher across any school and in the school system that wanted to go down this
Yeah.
this road. It's not limited to. It's not identified
Right.
in a particular school or set of schools. It's
Right.
for the school system.
Right, and so school system wide, how many national board teachers
That I
do we
don't
have?
know.
So we have quite a few.
We do.
So renewing 60 a
215?
year would keep the
Right now,
every 5
215.
215.
And as
Thank you.
as they get
you.
as we have additional, we'll make any adjustments we need to pick up on those renewals.
So we're staying as current as possible with the amount that
Yes.
we have. That's good.
Yes.
And
That's good.
is there any pent up demand for this? That there's more teachers that want to do it?
We have gotten feedback that these types of programs and retention efforts are what a lot of teachers are looking for. The upfront costs to do this, we would have a little bit in it. They would have some time in it. And then once they complete it, they have the potential of a 12% increase in their salary.
And there's
So
no
the other-
restrictions from
the
the
other-
state or anything?
Excuse me.
There's no restrictions from the state?
Mm-mm.
No.
Okay.
We brought this up in our last teacher advisory council meeting. We met at CATA a couple weeks ago. And I asked the question, if the school system was able to do this, where you're interested in either renewing your national board certification or applying to go through the process, and we were able to offset the cost, how many of you would be interested? Every hand went up.
They
We
did.
had several teachers that commented and said, it's the non-salary based types of strategies that we need to be thinking of that doesn't involve compensation that sometimes make as big of a difference, if not more. And this is one example that they unanimously supported.
For new applications for board certification, are we sharing the cost, paying, is it a full out grant for the entire cost? Is it reimbursement after they successfully pass? How are we?
There would be
handling that?
criteria and then a commitment to the district for a period of time.
Okay. If I understand, I've been told the cost for a new certification is around $1,500.
Yes, sir.
Is that around like 500 for recertification?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we envision for the lucky applicants that are selected, defraying the full $1,500 cost?
Yes, like I said, with the criteria and some commitment to the district, probably a 3-year commitment to the district after that.
Great.
Can I ask a question? No. So on the hourly increase for non-certified, the projected 2.5, so that's to get them to 15.
Say that again. Which line? What are you?
A1,
Okay, that could be some that are at 15 to get an additional 2.5, or those that didn't quite get to 15 to get over with the 2.5 to get to 15. Yes,
So everybody of your above 15.
yes.
and that's basically everybody who's hourly, that falls in non-certified?
No, that is non-certified is going to include custodians and others. There's a lot of different categories that are included in that non-certified group.
Is that instructional assistants?
Yes,
Okay, so then the number for B2,
yes.
is that getting them to what, like then what would we be going from?
We would be looking at more like a $16 an hour minimum. I believe the proposal that CMS did has them at $16.50. They proposed their teacher assistants at $16.50. So this additional would bring them to a minimum of 16.
And then what about for the facilities skilled trades?
That's going to vary based on the trade. So
Will it take them above the county or near the county so that we're not losing employees to the county still?
it's intended to, based on the specific trades that we're having the most difficulty with.
Okay, because that's a hard thing. We get the money from the county, but they're paying more than we are, and we're losing employees to the county.
Yeah,
So-
and we struggle with that with CMS as well. So we try to compete, but sometimes we can't be as competitive.
I thought that the TAs would be brought up to like 1637.
We could, I mean, at least 16 is what this would, And we will work on those salary schedules and to ensure that we don't have compression issues. And once we add the 2.5% to that, it would take them higher than,
How long has it been since the TAs have had a raise?
they were in 1920. They were the compensation market adjustment in 1920.
And
FY.
And facility, yes, facilities was 1819.
D1, is that the increase for locally funded certified staff? Help me with that number, D1.
That would be for all teachers and certified staff that have 15 to 25 years of experience.
That would add an additional 2.5 on top of the state 2.5?
Right, on top of the current state schedule, yes,
Because they don't get any in the state schedule.
yes.
So,
They're held at a 10-year span, they all
Right.
make the same pay. on the
but
state
that's
scale.
not a mandatory item is why it's not in the mandatory column.
Correct,
It's
that
just us
would
trying
be
to
a
keep it-
local initiative, yes.
Us trying to keep the steps as steps rather than
And
flat.
and retain,
More experienced teachers.
yes.
Yes.
Well, in my mind, that almost needs to go in the mandatory column. Because if you're bumping up here for this level of experience, you can't lose ground to your more experienced staff. Everybody's, if one group is going up 2.5%, everybody's got to go up at
Agree.
least
Everything in
2.5.
the needs is really,
Yeah,
want,
needs.
it's needs and it should be
Well,
mandated.
let's,
But
Yeah.
mandated just means that the state
Got-
told us we
yeah.
had to do it.
but let's be
Or
clear.
insurance increases,
There's additional needs and there's
initial needs.
really
Yeah.
additional, the in-between, between mandatory and additional needs. Because we're talking about let me make sure I have this clear. Our more experienced staff would be losing ground
Mhm.
without this locally funded increase.
Yeah, there are increases on the state salary schedule. They include in the state budget an average of 2 to 2.5%. But that may be higher in the lower
Mhm.
steps, and the higher steps sometimes are held harmless or get a lower percentage than the 2.5%.
Because if you're making less, it looks like a higher percentage bump. If you're making more, then that dollar amount is lesser percentage. So it doesn't track equally. I see what you're saying. So I think the last thing we want are more experienced teachers to lose ground from a good intentioned pay increase, but because of their experience level and where they are on the ladder, they lose out. And so we have to locally make up the difference.
Yeah.
That to me is an extremely, well, they're all important, but that's critical.
Well, I think that the facilities and TAs are really important too, because we've increased salaries for a lot of other categories this past year. And that's great. That's a great thing to do, but they're below some of those others now. And I think that that's the hard thing. And especially with the facilities people, because we're losing a lot of them to the county. So,
The difficulty with, especially with those two groups as well, is when we did the implementation of the market study, there have been no increases since that time either.
Yeah.
So
So that's
so even though we adjusted their pay, there were no state increases that went on top of that to kind of keep up. So now we're back in a similar situation.
And you could
And
have had other entities and counties
Yes.
where they were paying more
Yes.
while we were not. And
And
now
I'm-
we're trying to catch
right.
up.
Yep.
And I'm not really sure back then that we did a great job of making sure that those were good numbers. I'll just say that.
Those individuals that we are losing to the county, and God knows money is important, and nobody misinterpret what I'm saying. But is it strictly the money is why they're losing? Is it strictly that they could make X, Y number an hour more, or is there something else within the areas where where they're leaving, because we can fight off some of the losses, maybe not necessarily with increases at this time if we can't do it, but we can fight off the losses if there's something interiorly going on that might cause a segment of that population to be leaving.
I think the increases over time have gotten significant enough to where it is hard for them to not consider changing. So in some trades, it may be up to $10,000 more a year.
It's between the county and the state. They have a different,
They are part of a different retirement system.
okay.
Speaking of benefits, can you compare health insurance between the two? I don't know how exactly our health insurance is set up. Do we subsidize or pay for any portion of family members? Or do we know, does the county do that? When I first entered the workforce, it was just kind of given that you got health insurance and the employer paid it. Nowadays, the costs of health insurance and the type of coverage it provides, especially if you have children and a spouse, can be significant. How do we handle that?
We participate in the state health plan.
Right.
So those rates are dictated at the state level.
Mhm.
We do pay for, or there is some portion of that is covered for the employee only, but not for family. So a few years ago, now we go through a process on an annual basis for annual enrollment, and you do an attestation and go through a couple of health questions, but the employees do have to have a monthly deduction, even for the employee only now.
I think too, last year when we were at the county meeting, when they approved budgets last year, didn't they add a maternity leave and a paternity leave into their
I think
Which
they
is
can
another
they control
benefit.
their benefits package
better than we can? Right. Right, they don't. They can do some of their benefits on their own.
And we've offered some flexible benefit options for some of our staff and tried to do some things that they can enroll in themselves at as minimal as possible.
I think it's important to note, we are hamstrung by our participation in the state program. We don't have a choice of going out locally, getting health insurance bids to find a better program at a lower cost.
Correct.
We have what we have, and either you're in or you're out.
Right.
If you opt out, for whatever reason, your spouse has better coverage that will cover you,
Right.
then of course you're not charged.
Correct.
But as far as if you desire coverage, there are probably some deductible options within the plan, but the plan itself is what we've got.
Yes.
I think that's a good discussion because I think that some of our residents don't understand the difference between what we can do and what we can't do, but what the county can do. And one of them is also the Esser Funds, the school districts can only use Esser Funds for loss of learning or something connected loss of learning, where the county and the state doesn't have that. They restrictions. They can do what they want with the funds, and we are not a lot more restricted of what we can do.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes. We get specific allocations that give specific criteria on exactly how to use the funds. So yes.
I think that's a point that I want to add an exclamation point to, because I know the questions come up. Well, how much Esser funds do you have sitting around? Well, it doesn't matter if you've got $100 million laying around, if it's restricted to where you can use it, and we've used all we can use for those specific purposes. It's not play money you can just throw around to buy all the board members a company car. It's very restricted in its use. So again, like Ms. Heintel's saying, we have restrictions. You think about this. You're trying to you're trying to offset the learning loss from the pandemic, and we have significant restrictions, and the county can use some of their funding for a water system, water improvements, which are great, but what's that got to do with COVID?
Article in the NC Journal about that, about the state and counties don't have to do something about COVID. It's not connected to COVID, where we're connected to COVID from the learning loss. So that's a huge difference between what we can do and what they can do. But again, it's all one-time money, so we can't use it for recurring and stuff like that. And I assume the county's doing the same there, so.
Okay, so next is student growth in our charter school enrollment. Every time we increase our local dollars, the charter school per pupil portion increases, and we have to, make adjustments and allocations for that as well. I'm projecting 850 right now.
Brings up to a total of how much of our local budget that goes to charter schools.
That would be a little over $11 million.
So we are the pass-through through the county.
Yes.
So it's a per pupil number that goes to the charter schools for
Yes.
Union County students from Union County that go to charter schools.
Right, resident students is
Okay.
kind of the language they use, is resident students of Union County. When they enroll in a charter school, regardless of where it's located, they submit an invoice to us on a monthly basis, and we send them the per pupil
And-
share.
So $11 million of our budget goes directly to the charter schools for their students.
And that's another one of those,
So that's like
Mandated
10%
funds.
of our budget.
Yes, it is.
we provide the overhead to calculate the money and distribute it too, correct? Without
Yes.
getting paid for it.
No.
from the
Yeah,
state.
there's no deduction for the administrative
Yeah, we
piece
administer
of
it,
that,
yeah,
no.
yeah.
There's been the whole discussion for a
Yes.
long time about whether
It's been
the
years.
county should be doing it or
Yeah.
we should be doing
What-
it. Shauna would say that the county should be doing it.
Well, it makes
It's
sense.
it's a very labor intensive process.
That's why
um,
they
It's
don't.
monthly, right? You
Yes.
look at the numbers
We
monthly.
verify that we find errors. A lot of the charter schools don't have very experienced staff to understand maybe Power School or what to submit or what county this town is in or this zip code. We get PO boxes a lot. So we do our due diligence to ensure that every dollar that goes out is for a student that truly is in Union County.
Great.
So I have a question with charter schools. Dr. Houlihan, when students transition from public school to charter school, do we have a conversation, like an exit questionnaire on why? Because that's a lot of money. And we need to I think we need to figure out how we need to keep our kids in public school. So is there anything that we just let them go?
I hope not. The expectation, the protocol that's been in place is that when you have a family that withdraws their child, we are supposed to ask them the reason for it. There is a field in Power School where you can enter into that field what that reason for withdrawal is, and you can list homeschool, private, charter. If they choose another school, we typically ask what is the school, so that we can denote that in Power School, and that becomes a record for us. And so we have stressed to our data managers and our principals that this is the expectation, but it is not required of the family. Sometimes families do not want to tell you why they're withdrawing or where they're going. So it is up to that two-way conversation, but that is our expectations.
So I have a question. If a student is at a charter school and it's after the 40-day and they come back to Union County Public Schools, does the funds follow back?
The
or-
state funds do not. Charter schools are funded on their 20th day enrollment. So if a student, a lot of charters start in July. So if a student is enrolled in a charter school prior to even our school starting, they come to Union County schools and enroll. The potential of that enrollment ADM going to the charter school is very likely, because if they were there in that 20-day window, it would already be allocated to the
And if
charter.
they come back to UCPS after that 20th day, then the state funding doesn't
The
Money
state
doesn't.
funding does not, but
Okay.
we do not continue to pay any of the local portion. We
We do.
track.
Okay.
Right, we
So
deduct
you
that.
do it monthly. So you're looking
It's
at the
based
number
on
of
month.
students in each charter monthly.
Every
Okay.
month.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
It fluctuates. too.
Yes, a lot.
Of this 11 million that we're paying to charter schools, how does that translate into population? Do we anticipate an increase in charter school population, it being level or decreasing?
Well, we always project an increase normally because a lot of the charters around us are adding a grade level or, we take all that into consideration. I think right now we're paying a little over 40,000 charter school students and we're projecting a little over 41,000 students for next year. I mean, not thousand, sorry.
41, yeah.
4,000 and 4,100. Sorry. Had a little extra zero
You-
there.
You have it going up about, not a lot,
Yeah, it's not a huge
60,
increase.
60.
Because they're on par with us. One thing we do normally experience, the state will build in projections for charter school enrollment increases. If they exceed their enrollment increase by more than 10%, they will deduct it from our state allotment when we receive our funds,
Thank you.
Question,
regardless of what our enrollment increase may have been.
question and tie into the next topic with the athletics.
Yes.
Would that also, since that's local funding, would that follow a charter school student?
Any local dollars or local revenue we receive from the county in our local operating is eligible for, is part of our per pupil funding.
So the
Yes.
850 increase includes all of the additional that we have on this piece of paper,
Yes,
pieces of paper.
yes.
Okay.
So since you brought up athletics, I'll move on to program expansion. We do have a presentation tonight to go through middle school, the middle school athletic program. You're one of 3 of the implementation. What you see on the additional needs are the reoccurring costs for supplements and an assistant director. We do have high school, the number of coaches we have for cross country and indoor track. We need to increase the number of coaching stipends that we have to increase supervision. Those, as I think I mentioned on Tuesday of last week, we've had an increase in interest in both of those programs and need to expand them. Then we have pre-employment drug screening, which is $40,000 that we've listed under additional needs for a district our size. We want to start doing pre-employment. Right now, we just do random drug tests. So as you can see at the bottom, our mandatory increases are 4.6, and we've got 7.8 in additional needs, which gives us a total request of $124 million for this coming school year. We'll move on to capital. So on our capital request, we have our annual CIP, identified projects that have come out of facilities committee of $19.4 million. We've got our laptop leases, which are recurring expenditure that we have every year on our budget request. We are currently reviewing the teacher and admin units for replacement. That 5-year lease is up, so that number may or may not need to adjust. We have network, some additional network needs and equipment identified from technology for cybersecurity and school network equipment. And then our co-curricular funds that we have on an annual basis for our band uniforms and equipment, which is Cuthbertson High School this coming year. So we have $23 million on our capital request. So if we go,
I'm sorry.
Go
And you had said at our meeting that they said 680,000 was the increase for capital.
so the proposed increase of the 3.5 for capital is $647,000 for this year.
Is that all, Jay? I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
He'd like for it to be.
I have some specific questions about the capital items. For instance, roofing, I know that can be, correct me if I'm wrong, that's kind of, I don't want to say time sensitive, but it's time specific. In other words, we can't do that work while the kids are in school. So since the budget wouldn't be approved until July, it's usually, if it's a small job, it can be done over the Christmas break, or we'll have to wait till summer of 2023. Is that correct?
Well, we have
Pretty
all
much.
of those projects on a rolling.
Right.
You know, we've built in since 3-4 years ago, we built in a budget for roofing for
Right.
maintenance and or a new project. So they can't start bidding and even issuing contracts until we have allocations of funds.
Right. And since some of those projects we can't do when kids are in the building, then it would have to wait until the next summer or Christmas break.
Right. So you're
Right.
talking about how we used to get we used to get a true up that we would get in March or.
No, I'm just talking about projects.
I
specific
understand, but
capital
it's the
projects.
same idea. We could start doing projects before
Right,
June.
right.
Right. So
Right.
in the way they're doing it now, because we don't get true ups anymore because we don't have a tax rate.
Right.
That's another discussion. But we have to wait until they approve the budget. Unlike
Right.
the operating budget that begins on July 1, we get the capital money when they approve the budget. So we can get going right away. But I see what you're saying. You're
still
asking
too
if we
late.
could get some
Yeah.
early so that we can start doing, but not only roofing, but painting too, because you can't paint a school when kids are in it.
Well, stop me if this isn't the appropriate place to talk about it, but projects that are time sensitive, I would like staff to confirm, because I've been getting secondhand comments or comments made in a political setting, that the county they've set, and on a conservative basis, that's fine, a 20% of their savings account, fund balance, savings account. And I'm hearing that for the 2021, not the current year we're in, but the year that's already closed, put to bed, they are exceeding that 20% target. So since there are, I still have a concern that we're owed a true up for 2021, but that's a different argument. My thought process is, depending on what the answer is from the county as far as their, what I'll say, surplus from the 2021 tax year, when we approve our budget, what's keeping us from making an ask that they fund these projects so that we can start pre-funding these projects once our budget's turned over to them in May? If they will, and I'm looking at you, I'm not asking you specifically, but we're going to submit our budget in May. If the county has a surplus in their fund balance, projects identified by the facilities committee that are time sensitive, if they could be approved on an expedited basis, then we could address them this summer, like roofs and painting. So if the county has over reserves by X number of dollars, can we not put together a proposal for Y portion of that to accelerate funding on mutually agreed upon projects, so that we can hit the time frame when kids aren't in the building to address some of these projects? Is that?
I mean, I'm sure facilities could put together a project list with some
We could do
dollar
that.
amounts to
We
submit.
we could ask them and submit it and see where they go.
So I guess my question is, I would ask staff to get an answer from the county finance staff.
I think we
I
just
know.
ask.
All right.
I
Yeah,
think
that's fine.
that at the nest.
Because I'm not sure that
Well, I
the
would like to
county
know as a
finance
taxpayer, one. Second, as a board member, if the county is exceeding its own guidelines for its fund balance, And we have needs that we're already being told we're not even going to come close to. We're not even going to break even on what we're being told. I think we deserve an answer why some of those excess fund balance funds cannot be used on some of these time-sensitive capital projects.
So we can ask our facilities director and Mr. Moore to take a look at that, and we'll talk about it in facilities, and we can add that.
Yeah, there's a
The budget.
lot of projects like lights, ceiling tiles, paving. I would say probably 60,
We do some
70%
work
of all
over the
these.
holidays
Yeah.
too, that helps, so. But we can.
Yeah.
I guess they can look into whether or not we can get bids quickly and get stuff done over the summer. So, yep. Okay, I will add that to facilities.
So this slide brings all of what we just talked about into one place. So right now, we receive 111, a little over 111 million in local operating. We have $18.4 million that we receive in capital, which is $130 million overall. The request for change in our local operating, as we reviewed, is $12.4 million, which brings us to the 124 on operating. And in our capital is 4.8 increase to bring us to 23,275. That's a total of $147 million between capital and operating. Right now, 3.5% increase is 3.9 million in local operating and 647 in capital. That's the total of 4,547.
Where did you come up with the 3.5%?
They gave it
That's that county, in conversation with county staff, that is what the county manager is building his budget with a 3.5% increase.
What's the current inflation rate?
It's over 7%.
So we're getting we're being told we're going to get less than half the current inflation rate.
That's what that's what he is building. What they indicated is they are building their budget with a zero tax rate increase. So 3.5% is a zero tax rate increase.
Now, if we were successful in agreement with the county on what I previously mentioned about expediting time-sensitive capital projects, that would remove them from this budget request, would it not? If they paid for it out of their surplus fund balance, then it no longer is part of our budget request, right?
Right. We would
Okay.
yes.
All right.
For the coming year.
Right. Right.
So a total of funding that we currently receive with the 3.5% increase is 134,000,005. So this request exceeds our projected funding of 3.5% with the 3.5% increase by $12.7 million. No, that's everything. That included on the mandated items. We're about $745,000 short of the 3.9 with what we need to cover, which was the 4.6.
What we're asking for just in mandated is 4.644 million.
Yes.
So
Let's highlight that for the folks at home that might be watching. So we're being told in the initial construction, the county staff for their budget like we do for our process.
Correct.
We're not even going to break even on the increase in costs we have on mandated things we have to do, things we have to pay, and the increase in those items, we're not even going to break even.
Correct.
Correct?
And
All
a
right.
big majority of that is due to the supplement increase for the teachers.
I want everybody to
yes,
see where we are right now, where the starting line of this back and forth right now of what we're being told, we're underwater. Okay,
Well,
that's
a
not
large
about all
part.
at once.
A large part of it is the $2 million for the teacher supplements that they said they would give us the money for next year. They did half of it. They gave us 500 per teacher. We found money to do the other half, so we did the 1,000, relying on their word that they were going to give us the rest of the money. And we were told that it wouldn't be part of our increase, but they would fund it. And here we are.
So we were told that would be above
Melissa
and
and I,
beyond
yes,
this 3.5%.
yes. And Todd was there too. Yes. Sorry, Mr. Price.
So that, have you, when, in speaking with county staff, was that mentioned at all? That obligation or that commitment was still?
Dr. Houlihan and I asked that question, and staff told us that we needed to include that as part of the 3.9.
So what I remember from our budget conversations last year was on the county side, just the way they were able to run their increases was they would start their increases in January. And that beginning in January, the stipend increase for our teachers would kick in, and they would assume that responsibility going forward, understanding that that's not a one-time expenditure. And they were completely supportive of helping move our teacher stipend from 19th in the state, and to get us back into like around number 10 in the state. And so they said it was very clear that they supported the teacher stipend. This was important, but because of the way their decisions were made on the county side, their increases begin in January, and they said that that's how they would prefer to work it for the teacher stipend as well, that they would begin increasing that in January, and that it would roll forward.
And they do it the same way. So assuming that they're doing the whole thing the next fiscal year, which
It was never a conversation
Exactly.
that they would do half a year and then we'd have to ask again in the following budget. They said that they would assume responsibility beginning in January.
And I've heard the chair of the BOCC talk at meetings where he has said that they have given the money for this teacher supplements, but that's not really what's happening.
So from the time that the chair and that.
And Mr. Price, we're the liaisons, Mr. Price.
Right, I got you. And had that meeting until the time that staff just met with county staff. What did county staff say happened to cause this change to occur?
It's my understanding, I'll, and if I'm incorrect, please step in, but it's my understanding that the county was surprised when we, because we told them from the very beginning, our teachers come back to work in August. And we wanted our teacher stipend to begin in August. And since we had funds available to go ahead and begin in August, knowing that the county would take up their responsibility and begin making those stipend increases in January, we were able to approve it in our board to go ahead and start giving that stipend in August when the teachers came back from COVID, instead of having, to wait until January to see if they would even come back. So in my opinion, I got the impression that the county was not happy when we began initiating this in August for our teachers, so that our teachers would not have to wait until January.
Well,
Well, we
I
did,
don't understand.
we did pay a one-time payment
Yeah.
effective in August, in December for our teachers,
Out of our own money.
out of our own money, yes.
Why should they care? Why should they care if we used our own money to pay our own people so that we could try and get them off the bottom rungs of the pay scale.
Retain our teachers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's the
Well,
whole purpose
And,
of
and
all
keep in
this.
mind, we were, in August, when these teachers, were coming back in August, a lot of them had been virtual. And we were asking all of our teachers, that the $1,000 stipend had been approved, and we were encouraging all of our teachers, to come back 5 days a week. And so this board, instead of waiting until January for it to kick in, we went ahead and we were proactive in encouraging our schools and our administrators and our teachers to try and get back to normal. And this is what we've agreed to with the county. The county agreed to it, and it was an effort to bring the number one performing school district in the state, to bring us from 19th in the state teacher stipend back into maybe number 10. And this was a decision that we did to kind of put skin in the game on our side while we waited for the county to kick it in January, because their accounting system worked better in waiting till January. And I don't know where the surprise is, but our teachers come back in August, and everyone last budget season agreed that Union County Public School teachers deserved better than number 19 in the state.
Okay, so let me see if I summarize this correctly. Of what we're being told initially from county staff in their budget, initial work, we should be expecting an increase of $4.5 million. Of that, $2 million is money that we were promised for the additional stipends. So 40% of the increase we're getting is money that was supposedly already committed for this purpose.
That's correct.
Okay. And
So now
doesn't sound fair, does it?
we're facing using almost 50% of the increase for the one thing, because we've already committed to it. So it's a recurring cost. So
We're
we
going to
have,
take care of our people.
of course we are.
Where we got to scrape it from. But,
Okay.
Well, and that's why we really need work with the liaisons, the county liaisons, and we have sent an invitation over to the county, asking them, for a joint meeting. And we did hear back that when we formally send this to them, I guess they'll pick a date. They said that they would look forward to that discussion.
So they won't meet with us before we give them the final.
Correct. And I think I copied you on the
Yeah.
email so that you could see the correspondence. But I think it's very, very important that all the board members here, especially the liaisons, reach out to our county commissioners, because we're getting this from staff, but I'm like 100% positive that our county commissioners did support this teacher stipend last year. And the chair himself has been in public, promoting the fact that we did this stipend for our teachers.
I'm sorry, remind me, so what, we'll vote on this at the next meeting and then you'll send it?
Go to finance first, and then finance will recommend it to the full board at the May meeting.
Yes, so
And
any
then-
changes or adjustments that we need to make between now and the finance committee, and then you'll,
We always have a goal that after the board meets on that Tuesday, we try to get it to the county by the end of that week.
which I believe is May the 6th. So,
Which means the April dates that we tossed to them may not happen.
Well, they said they weren't going to meet with us until after we give them the budget, the final budget, which is due by the 15th, right? of May?
it's
Right, but
statutorily by the 15th
The three
of May.
April dates that we sent to them, I guess will not happen.
Right. Because
That-
we
that's
won't
the
have it.
point I was
Yes,
trying
correct.
to
Oh, I'm
make.
sorry, yes.
Okay. Because those 3 dates will pass before the May meeting.
So I'm going to turn it over to, if you all are ready, to Nelson.
Good evening. So what I'm going to do here is share kind of an overview of a presentation we sent out a few weeks back to you guys, and this is going to have a few revisions in it, but just kind of a recap of everything that was in that in somewhat of a shortened version here as we look at our proposal for middle school athletics. So we put together a committee back early in the fall, and the task was to kind of look at our middle school model, which is very unique. Really, it's the only one in the state that operates quite the way it does. And part of that was to identify.
So we're the only district in the state that doesn't have
that
middle
I'm
school.
aware of. And so, you know, we have a different operation here. and-
What, hold on a minute.
So we have 116 districts, and we are the only one that doesn't pay for middle school
Is that
athletics.
accurate? Is that accurate statement?
I have yet to run into another district that does it quite like us. Yep. So I can't say that with absolute certainty, but I can tell you that in everyone I've spoken with across the state, which is a lot of folks, that it's unique. Yes.
And all of our predecessors have said the same thing.
Yeah, no problem. And so what we wanted to do was first identify what the issues were with our system and where we felt like there were some problems that needed to be addressed. I won't read all these, but I will highlight a couple of them. The biggest one being opportunities as they relate to the strength of your booster club. In other words, we've got students that their opportunity in certain sports is reliant on the strength of their booster club. And in some cases, those booster clubs don't have the volunteer power or the money to offer certain sports. And what we see is that trickles down to the high schools. The feeder programs dry up, and so therefore, you know, we start to see programs die at the high school as well. And one of the other big things that's concerning that we identified is a lack of coaching, training, and accountability, similar to what we have for our high school coaches. Our high school coaches have a certain amount of coaching education required of the North Carolina High School Athletic Association, and so we add a little bit to that as well. So when it comes to health, safety, and just generally how we want to teach our coaches to be involved in education-based athletics, there's a certain amount of training that goes on. That does not exist in our current format. What we also found is a lack of consistency when it comes to eligibility of our athletes. In other words, some of the booster clubs are doing a pretty good job of monitoring that, but it's not consistent across the district. So we've got students that have different, you know, they're not meeting the grade standard they would if they were in high school, and yet they're continuing to play. Attendance, eligibility, behavior, all those things we're leaving that up to the booster clubs, and we're finding that it's inconsistent across the district. Lack of just consistent governance and design of the leagues that our teams are playing in. It's really right now dependent on the sports. What sport you're playing determines kind of how the rules have been written. And we'd like to streamline that and feel like it's important to make that more consistent, much like our high schools. Safety, liability concerns, and just general inappropriate behavior. We've run into situations where, you know, incidents are happening and we don't have administration, we don't have school representation at those events. It becomes a little bit of a black eye for the district when we have those situations. Not to say our high schools are perfect, but we don't run into as much of that because of the accountability piece with the school system. So those are, you know, you can read through the rest of them, but those are the main ones we identified. There are benefits. It's important, I think, to state with the current model. We are unique, and there are some opportunities that our current system affords. Booster club revenue is one of those things. You know, basically, our middle school sports programs operate as a type of fundraiser, and that's an opportunity for school districts clusters to make money for their booster clubs. We're able to offer a few more sport offerings. When you look at what's generally offered in middle school athletics across the state, we extend that a little bit because of our booster club model and the number of sports, things that are not as mainstream that we can offer, and sometimes more grades can participate because we're not under state governance.
But again, it comes back to the equity issue that not all schools get to offer those.
Exactly. Yep. Obviously, less direct responsibility for our administrators and our teachers, I guess, would be considered somewhat of a benefit, although it can be a detriment as well, as I just finished describing. We don't have the same state oversight because we're not run by the district. Once we take a sport and put it under the governance, of the district, we fall under the State Board of Education for extracurricular activities, much like our current basketball system is. So, in some sense, our teams can do more because they don't have the same oversight and accountability. And then obviously the financial piece is one we haven't had to occur up to this point. So at the conclusion of our meeting as a group throughout the fall, what we did was we ended up coming up with a kind of a phased-in approach recommendation. And this is one piece that has changed slightly since the last presentation you guys got. We initially had looked at phasing in two new sports in the fall. Those would be volleyball and wrestling. And the reason for those was the feedback we got was that administrators would like to take control of the sports that are in their brick and mortar buildings. There's some concern over folks that you don't know being in your buildings late at night because you're having to give keys so they can practice. We wanted to kind of take control of our buildings. So initially, those were the first two sports we proposed adding in 22-23. However, as we looked at the timeline and just the quick turnaround of trying to have fall sports this fall and where we're sitting right here in April, based on feedback of our principals, that was a little bit of a stressor for them, the idea of turning those around. So we took that feedback, revised this so that we would still offer wrestling in 22-23, but instead we would add girls and boys soccer in the spring as our second two sports to get us kicked off. And that gives us some time to implement some of the things that we need to do in our 30, 60, 90-day plan to make this transition happen if it happens. You can see up there, 23-24, we phase in 4 more sports: cross country, football cheer, and volleyball. And then we finish it off in 24-25. The recommendation would be to add 3 more spring sports: baseball, softball, track and field. And so by that year, we would fully be operational with those sports, which again are the sports that we found are either already being offered at all the schools or we feel like could be offered relatively inexpensively without the equipment. And we feel like it's not a guarantee, but each school would at least have a good opportunity to offer those sports. So. And then the potential of some of those fringe sports continuing to be allowed to be operated by the booster clubs. You're looking at your swimming, tennis, things that we only have a few sports offering at the middle school level right now, to potentially continue those under booster club guidance.
That would include lacrosse probably and golf.
Lacrosse,
and,
yep. There were only 3 boys teams that offer that now, or 3 girls and 4 boys, which is why we didn't include that one in our initial offerings.
And I just want to clarify, if we are able to do this in 22-23, schools that do have, volleyball, baseball, softball, cross country, they would be able to continue. It just wouldn't be district funded.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. We would let the booster clubs continue to operate through this transition, and start to prepare them for that transition.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask too, I know some of the sports, soccer, might generate more interest at some schools versus others. Are we anticipating some schools not potentially having one of those sports?
Right now, what we've seen, and we base some of this off of our success at the booster club now. Soccer is one of those that we've seen consistently offered at all of our schools, both girls and boys, which is why it was included, and also one we thought might be a good one to start with this spring.
Okay.
But we're hoping overall this plan would give us the infrastructure and the logistical planning to offer more opportunities to students that haven't had them. We've gotten feedback at certain schools that the students and parents would love to play this sport, but their booster club's just not set up to offer it.
I'm going to add a number 10 to your why district run middle school athletics, and that's the transportation issue. I'm sure there are some working families that struggle with being able to transport their middle schooler that wants to be involved in a sport to away games or maybe even to home games.
Correct.
And by us assuming responsibility, financial responsibility, that would include transportation, correct?
That is correct.
And the curriculum, I'll just add.
And it gives you a conference to play in,
Right.
because right now they don't.
Just kind of hodgepodge.
Right.
I want to also add, during a curriculum committee meeting with principals of East Union Middle and Monroe Middle School, they were both very highly supportive of this prospect and feeling like this would really instill in their students an opportunity to participate. You got middle school kids that are involved in sports instead of wondering what mischief to get into before mom and dad get home, as well as holding their feet to the fire to be eligible from a grade standpoint. So there's a little motivation there to get their studies in line to participate in these sports.
Yeah, that is correct. We found really positive results with our basketball program, the one that we offer, as a way to keep kids engaged and academically eligible where maybe they might not have normally. So yeah, I'm obviously a big proponent of athletics being one of your best dropout prevention programs you can have.
So we've been talking about this for 5 years now. And I think that it's time to pull the trigger or whatever. That's not a good analogy. I think it's time to do it because we've been talking for 5 years. And I think it's something that we should do.
And it's a service that if we're the only one in the state that we know of that's not doing it, it's not a service, or it's a service we are not providing to our stakeholders that other systems are. And that's
I agree.
unfair.
Question two,
Go ahead.
okay, with the transportation, we're assuming that the games are going to happen right after school. Is that going to be the case?
Primarily, I think that would be one shift from our current model. And there are some logistical things we need to work through on finding, we share stadium space for football.
Yeah.
So trying to
That's what I'm bringing
squeeze
up.
those games in the fall between soccer and JV football, varsity football. We really looked at several school districts and their success of being able to do that. So we know it's possible. But there are some changes that would have to take place to make that transportation piece possible. It's not to say there couldn't be Saturday events. There could still be some Saturday cross-country events that we need to transport, but
But
there
they would
would
have,
be more of
the
a
parents would
shift.
have to bring the kids to the school and then they would
Correct.
be bused to the event.
That would be our goal.
Okay.
That's in high school, that's our goal. We have certain situations at times when they have to be transported with proper waivers, but our goal would be to give them that opportunity.
And we have enough buses to do that, or we'd be sharing with the high schools? Because right now, the activity buses sit at the high schools, right? So we will have enough buses to be able to do this? I'm looking at Mr. Moore.
Yeah,
Okay.
we've gotten some, that was one of the questions for Mr. Denton, and he's been able to confirm that they've got some extra buses they could transition into activity buses to add to sharing
Awesome.
the high school ones.
That's great.
Yeah,
And the whole idea was to see if our coaches can have their CDL so they can also drive the activity buses to games. Is that still in the plan?
Yes, that's the goal, and that's the challenge for us, much like regular driving. Keeping CDL drivers is a challenge right now. The budget proposal here does install a little bit of money to compensate them for driving in addition to their coaching stipend, something we've seen happen in other districts and other states, which we hope will incentivize that as another reason to get their CDL.
as we move towards this transition, what is the relationship with current Booster Club leadership and the school system in terms of how this is all playing out? Is there cohesiveness in that process, or is there pushback from booster clubs?
That's a great question. Until this is something official, it's been hard to go before them and communicate because we don't want to put too much information out there. Obviously, things get out there. We've gotten feedback from some that this is outstanding. It frees us up, as a booster club from all the day-to-day operations, which really booster clubs traditionally were not intended to do. They were intended to fundraise, not to run sports programs. So we have gotten some positive feedback just through the grapevine. I think there will be some that may be resistant because they've got a good operation going, and this change, may throw that off a little bit. I can't say for certain. I will tell you that the booster clubs are going to still be just as essential to the success of these programs. They come in behind, just like in the high school, and help fill that gap, where we can't sometimes. And so that's the message we would try and communicate, is that you're still just as important to us here. You're just not, we're taking some of this off your plate, the running of the sports, so that you can come in behind and support.
What's some of the things you're trying to do to soften the transition, if you will, to make them feel more of a teammate in the process?
Well, I mean, when you look at the reality of finding coaches, the reality is a lot of those coaches that they've already, identified could end up being some of our coaches here. And so to come aboard and say, hey, we still need you, we're just going to now take that coach and we're going to train him up a little bit, give him a little bit of accountability. So I think, trying to make them understand that they're partners in this. So
I think the other part of that is the fact that it's a 3-year phase-in proposal, right? That it's not all done at the same time. And I think that helps continue to make sure we have those relationships with the boosters over time, and to Nelson's point, beyond just the next 3 years. Because I do agree, they're going to have to remain essential partners with us.
And the boosters are still free to do concessions or whatever they want.
Absolutely.
There's probably more revenue coming in from that.
Absolutely. And what we hope, is we've taken a big chunk of the money that parents have had to invest just to play. It's our hope that some of that might be able to be reinvested back into their booster clubs, so they can continue to have great facilities, great things to support those programs. That's our hope. By freeing that burden, it frees them of their time that they used to spend running these sports, and also free some of those finances.
I agree. I think that it'll give them time over 3 years to get used to it, but it'll be like the high school booster clubs, which you still partake in them when your kids are in the high school playing sports as well. Question, gate. Does the gate go to the district or to the school, or how does that work?
So,
sorry.
We'll move on to kind of the finances of this. So we identified the yearly cost over, each year for the next 3 years. What I've got up here shows you the cost of year one. And without getting the presentation we sent out earlier has more of a detailed breakdown of this, but these are operational costs, meaning the cost to run a program at each school, some facility modifications that would be part of this, and then the big piece of that is compensation, coaching stipends, compensating the athletic directors at the middle school at a little higher level because of the increased workload. These are the identified areas that the operational costs were part of the ask of the budget proposal. And then some of those other facility costs would be come from that assigned fund balance.
So the assigned fund balance is not recurring, it's just
some of those costs, yes, some of those costs would be recurring. When you look at some funding for.
You knew I was going to ask that, right?
Until we establish what kind of revenue they can bring in from gate and other things, there are some of those things that we built into that fund balance number just because they were a bit unknown, and to include them in a recurring budget until
Gotcha.
we have more information.
Okay, thank you.
So we basically have a startup and then operational cost.
Pardon?
We have a startup cost and we have operational cost.
Correct.
Yes,
You-
yes. And we tried to create our budget based on zero revenue coming in until we got a sense of what that was going to be. It's not going to be at the same level the high school. There's limitations at some of our facilities, and but we'll get a better idea as we get into this.
So
what
some of
percentage
it would be equipment, uniforms,
Yes.
washing machines and dryers, commercial ones at the
Yep,
middle
yep.
schools.
That was
which we
part of
don't
that
have.
initial cost, and the operational costs are those
Coach,
reoccurring referees, security, those equipment,
and the
uniforms.
coach stipends comes out of operational?
That's the operational cost.
Okay.
Yes.
Have we talked to our vendor about having a trainer at any of the sporting events? I'm thinking specifically.
Yeah, so
football.
we as part of our recently signed contract with Atrium, we had written into that contract that for the first time this year, they were providing trainers at all the middle school basketball games, which was the first time that happened this year. They've also committed to athletic trainers for football games. we've got to work, we've got kind of a handshake agreement to grow with them on middle school and the other stuff. The football was the essential one. We wanted to make sure we had that, but we would continue to work with them to grow in that capacity as well too.
Okay, I have a question.
I think there's I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to make a comment that I think there's a significant safety factor and proper training for coaches, particularly in football. Proper tackling techniques, blocking techniques to prevent injuries. So I'm glad to see that we would be able to assume make sure the training is consistent for all the coaching staffs if this plan comes to fruition. So there'd be consistency throughout all the different programs.
And not to mention also, you have the high school programs. A lot of booster clubs in high schools do this as a feeder program. Moving up to high school, it gets it more in
This will help a
line with
lot.
each other.
Yes.
Yes, that will
Yes.
align.
Because it's not like
Right. And
who's
so,
coaching who this year in middle school.
so there's only one additional position that we have in our budget, and it would be an AD for the middle school, or just an assistant AD for your,
Correct. So what we proposed, and one of the, if you look at the more detailed presentation, one of the concerns obviously was that our middle school ADs right now, unlike the high school, they still have to teach 3 blocks out of the day. They only get 1 planning period. To get them extra planning periods we'd have to have extra allotments. We know all the headaches that would go with that. So we looked at a couple of the models from around the state, and hiring a district assistant athletic director we hope, especially unlike high school where we're across counties, we're in one county, we could put some of those responsibilities on that person when it comes to booking officials and scheduling and doing some of those daily. They're still going to have a heavier workload, but we hope with that position to help take some of that off their plate because they still only have the 1 planning period.
so that position would be underneath you in the higher. Okay,
That's
Okay.
kind of what we envisioned.
thank you.
The only, and I don't want to say a concern, but only pushback I've heard about this program is, can we just initiate this program for some of our schools that don't have the same financial capability as our more affluent schools over on the west side? In other words, try and help out the ones, but the other ones that are already flourishing, leave them alone. My answer was no, we need to be consistent for a lot of the reasons that we mentioned. And I don't think we can discriminate. We're going to take it over for these, but you guys are still on your own and winging it. Would you agree?
I agree, because it still doesn't solve the problem of consistency with eligibility, consistency with rules, consistency. I just don't, I can't feasibly see a way to make those two mesh.
And I know basketball currently is 7th and 8th grade. Are we looking, what happens to 6th grade? Is it just up in?
So North Carolina Department of Instruction allows for 6th graders to participate in any sport except for football. So we
Okay.
wouldn't be allowed to have them in football. Our proposal here has a 7th and 8th football option if needed. And then the other sports would operate like they primarily do. 6th through 8th could. There's the potential to, if we could make it work logistically, to continue to do JV varsity at the middle school level. It's not fully funded in here from a coaching standpoint, but if we can get volunteers to do that, if the opportunity is there for the students to create more opportunities, if the demand's there.
So like basketball would still be 7th and 8th. It would,
That's what the committee wanted to keep. They felt like that was
Right.
working well. And so we decided to keep basketball at just 1. And part of that has to do with gym space and
and there's rec leagues too that
correct.
feed up to
Yep.
it. You know?
Thank you so much, Mr. Garner. We appreciate everything
you.
that you went into your document that we got a couple weeks ago goes through everything. So I really appreciate that you looked at the pros, cons, and everything. So thank you very much.
Thank you guys.
And
Oh, sorry. I thought we were done.
hey, I got one. I guess the booster club's still free to help out with startup costs if we need to for whatever else, or if they have uniforms they bought the previous year, donate to them as long as they.
Yes, and that's a good point. I mean, we're going through this assuming, per board policy that items purchased by the Booster Club become property of the school system. And so, you know, we're working off the assumption that we're going to have some of that initial startup football helmets, uniforms that will be gifted over to the school itself.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's some of that transition
Excuse me?
that's some of that transition I was talking about.
Correct. Yep.
You know.
Absolutely.
The main thing here is cross-country rules.
Cross country what?
Rules.
Rules. Oh, okay.
And I would second that.
I'll get with you later on that.
Could you just repeat the Booster Club property thing again?
Well, our current board, and
Yeah.
I'll let Michelle correct me if I'm wrong, but does say that those items purchased by the booster clubs do become property of the
Okay,
Union County
just-
Public Schools.
I just wanted it out there.
And I just wanted a little bit more clarity on you said we're the only district with the unique middle school program. So I can't imagine that 115 others have fully funded middle school programs. Could you just do some more research on that? So the board can have a well-informed decision on, you know, how many districts in the state actually have middle school funded programs. And even if you have to look at like the top 10, top 20, top 25, give us an understanding of what we're really looking at. I
Okay.
can't imagine we're the only one.
I do know I can't go stretch out beyond 10, but I know in the top 10 school district, we're definitely the only one. I would imagine it extends out quite a bit, but I can certainly look into
What-
that. Even.
Does
Okay.
CMS offer sports?
They do.
They do. Okay.
Yes. I only know that because we lived in there for a while.
And one more question. You did say we'd be able to contain it in the county. Does that mean the Catholic, we wouldn't play Catholic anymore?
We don't, I mean, that's a logistical thing we'd have to work through. I can see some potential problems when it comes to being consistent with our rules and their rules. We like the basketball model. We feel like it works really well in this county. So that's a logistical piece we've not finalized yet. We'd have to start working through. And currently, if a basketball team, for instance, wants to go play an extra game against another school, they're allowed to do that and fall within the game limitations. Most of ours don't, but they are. So there would be some freedom to do that too.
One more thing.
Yep.
Can we look at doing an advertising model for middle school also? Like having advertisements for businesses or whatever at games,
Yeah,
like we do at high school?
absolutely.
Okay. Sponsorships and they could pay for ad space or however they want to do it.
Yeah, we would have to continue to work with our partners at National Amateur Sports who work with our high schools to secure district-wide partnerships. And, you know, as we get into more electronic ticketing, those opportunities increase too. Everything sponsorship-wise is leaning towards digital, but there's some opportunities there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we also have with the high schools where you can watch basketball games and other stuff.
Yes, the live
That would be
streaming.
nice. Live
Yep.
stream for
Yep.
middle
Yep,
school too.
absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. So board members, going back to the budget proposal, I want to open the floor for comments or questions.
So can we talk a little bit, the Esser Funds page isn't in here and the fund balance page isn't in here from last week budget, well, in the program. So I just want to talk about the 30 elementary reading specialist positions out of Esser Funds. So how many years is that to do that program?
What you see on there is the first year of it, and we're doing, 1 year at a time. But yes, that's the first year of it.
Okay.
The bottom line is that when
You
we
know
have
where I'm
Esser
going.
funds for 2 more
Right.
years.
Yeah, we
Right.
have Esser until
Esser
it's-
funds we only have until 2024. So it
Right.
would be technically it'd be a 2-year commitment
Yes.
on
So,
those
and it
positions.
elementary reading interventionist or specialist has to be a certified teacher. And how does that go between doing this position or a teacher? What's the
It's the same. They're on
same schedule?
technically different schedules, but the schedules are the same. All the money on those schedules are the same. So you have the reading specialist is going to be on, well, I guess it would be on the teacher salary schedule. Yes. But instructional support and teacher salary schedule are the same dollar amount per step.
So this would be one at each elementary schools, hence the 30.
Yes.
So going back to the national certification, if a reading specialist
Can I-
is nationally
oh,
certified,
okay.
do we pay that or does the state pay that? Okay.
Because they're still in the classroom. There is a time frame that they
Okay.
have to be in the classroom.
And I know that you were thinking about this before, but when the teacher from Newtown stood up at our meeting, some of us had conversations with them, and I thought it was a great program to do it. And I know you guys were already talking about it, so I'm glad that we found a way to fund it, because I think that there's a lot of learning loss, especially in reading at our elementary schools, so this will help with that.
Well, and I too, it's like, I just appreciate that that teacher stepped forward and, she had a great plan and really spelled it out, and it's nice to hear that kind of input.
That information that the.
And we can send all you guys the information that she gave too. I'll scan it and send it.
The information that's, that we're talking about is on the very last slide of the PowerPoint presentation that you all received last week. And we do plan at the end of this month to bring our Esser dollars that we plan to spend down, as well as the one-time fund balances, to the Finance Committee at the end of this month for additional discussion. Just
So
wanted
do
to
we
throw
think
that.
it'll be difficult to hire 30 additional teachers, given what the shortage that we have now? Okay.
I think it will. This is a situation where if the sooner we know that we can move forward with something like this, the better. May and June and July are our peak time for recruitment and retention. So this would be another strategy to keep really effective teachers in place as a reading specialist. But 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to come from within the building that they're already in.
Okay.
And so that then leaves a vacancy of another teacher.
And we
which
would need
have to
another
find.
teacher.
But from an HR standpoint, the sooner we know that this is going to be something that we're going to be doing, it will better help our HR team and our principals on placing people.
By the way, I saw the video of the recruitment from our Teacher of the Year.
Yeah.
I don't know, Ms. Stolber, did you do that? It was wonderful. No? It was wonderful. Thank you. Did everybody see that? It's a recruitment for our fair, our teacher, or our employment fair.
Yes. Yes.
It would be great if the whole board could see it at the next board meeting. It was really
was
good.
great.
It was really good.
I was going to say that too, so thank you for
Oh, you're
saying it.
welcome.
HR and communications partnered to do some additional recruitment efforts. And so we partnered with Spectrum Reach, and we're doing some things that are a little bit different to recruit. So the first project was teacher recruitment, and we're now working on bus drivers and custodians. That will be our next video that we'll run.
I heard from
A commercial.
citizens about the video and how great they loved it.
Awesome.
It was really good.
Is it possible to put on our website? Would they allow that?
I need to check with them on that. The recruitment efforts for this particular one is streaming. So we're streaming in areas where there are colleges where teachers are finishing school, to invite them to the career fair and let them know we have positions for the bus drivers and custodians. That one will run on cable TV. But I'll check on that.
Great job.
Thank you. It was a great job. And a great job to Mrs. McLam and your staff putting together all this. We
Great
really
job.
appreciate. Great job.
So I'm opening the floor to anyone, if you want to go back. If there are any questions, if everyone's good with exactly what we're asking for in this request. No questions, no comments?
I think they did a great job in the
I do too.
presentation, Madam
They answered all
Chair.
our questions.
They answered all our questions.
Okay, very good.
I guess I just have I'm just thinking out loud that there is a significant gap between what is the initial directions we're being given on a budget ask and what we've been over tonight. And I personally will struggle, significant struggle with what items I would feel comfortable eliminating from the ask. Now, as we all know, the final decision is not ours. For those of you out there that are not familiar with the actual process of funding your schools, there's of course, a federal and a state piece, but then the county, through your county commissioners, has the final say for our capital ask and our operating funds ask on a local basis. This Board of Education does not have financial flexibility to make the decisions for the operating or the capital needs. So we will be honing our ask, and then the county commissioners will, hopefully we will have expressed after we've submitted, we'll have it.
Why are we honing our ask? I think we have to
Well,
tell the county
we may
what our
not be
needs are and are
Right.
mandated, right?
well, let me finish.
Because
I'm
we've
just going through
honed
the
it in
process.
committee.
I'm just trying to inform of the process. We submit our ask.
Mhm.
We don't control what the final result is. We have to make it work what we get or what we don't get. Some of the things you've heard discussed now, we'll find out if they, make it through our ask. But I just want folks to understand where we stand today. We are basically being told our given at this point is not even a break even. And we have beyond that some other things that board is looking to support as well. So the next months until the July 1st new fiscal year will be interesting to say the least.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, and I'm sitting right next to you, so I guess I should. You're saying if that the general public at large have any questions concerning budgetary factors as it relates to Union County Public Schools, you're putting them in position to ask the appropriate entity that handles that.
I agree. We will submit our budget, and then I would ask that citizens, if you support our particular ask or particular parts of our ask, to make your comments known to the county commissioners as the ones who will have the final say. If you support these initiatives that have been discussed today, then I would hope you would voice your support accordingly.
I think what it boils down to for me, and hearing Mr. Sides and Mrs. Hinetail's comments tonight, is what I'm taking away from the staff to staff conversations and us trying to figure out what we may or may not get is, if what county staff is true in what was communicated to our CFO, when the state budget passes, we're going to be in the red. We will not be able to meet even the state mandates. And that's going to be a problem for this board if we are operating, if we're starting out the gate and we're already in a deficit. In the past, I think this board, one or two of us, three of us from time to time will go over to the county commissioners when they vote on this. I would encourage the board to start working with the county commissioners tonight, tomorrow, and start, talking about our non-certified staff, our certified staff, our facilities that their market is coming back around, the laptop leases, the teacher assistants that are coming back around, our assistant principals that have not seen an increase since 2014. These are the type of things that we absolutely need to start, having conversations with our county commissioners, because they may not be aware of what their staff communicated to our staff. So it's very important that that the burden doesn't just fall on the liaisons. All of us need to be having conversations with our county commissioners, what's in this budget, and trying to, set some time to sit down with them so that they can start asking questions, perhaps before May or June. If we're not able to get a joint meeting, hopefully we will. But I just encourage every single one of us. The urgency is that if we only receive what the county manager told us, we're in the red. And how in the world do you walk back a teacher stipend that we were all under the impression last budget cycle that was hands down taken care of? So that's the plea I make to this board.
Every year, there's $3.5 million at least of mandated stuff from the state. So it's not new to them that we would have this kind of ask just for mandated stuff. So I'm just so confused by it all. But Mr. Price and I will get in touch with them and we'll have some conversations as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Gary.
Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Take care, everybody.